Hey everyone, Chris here, and in this video we're going to answer the question, are we over-diagnosing mental health issues? This follows on from my video last week about whether we are over-diagnosing neurodivergence, but this week we're going to look at things like anxiety and depression. So these are skyrocketing, and some politicians have questioned whether we might be over-diagnosing them or making a big deal out of modern life. Now, in terms of are we overdiagnosing distress, the answer is no, but we are fundamentally misunderstanding the term disorder when we talk about anxiety disorders and depressive disorders, and we're going to get into that in this video. So the first thing to say then is, are people more distressed than they were? And the answer is yes. Research backs this up. So if you want to look at it, the book, The Inner Level, collates so much of this research on how distress is increasing. And it's increasing directly as a result of rising inequality. So we're seeing increasing instability around housing, jobs, food. It's harder to get healthcare nowadays. And all of these things are translating into real world greater distress for people. So we are measurably more stressed. We are measurably more hopeless than we were a generation ago. And one of the reasons that millennials and Gen Z are so distressed is that boomers just had a much easier life than these generations did. Life was just easier back then. So to give you one example, houses today cost twice as much relative to our salary as they did a generation ago. So if we think about things like interest rates, right, you're now having to borrow twice as much on your mortgage as you were, which means that everything is doubled. So a common retort is, well, 6% interest rates aren't that bad. It was 12% in my day. But of course, if houses cost twice as much, everything is doubled. So 6% today is the same as paying 12% back then. So it's like we're in those really dark times of when interest rates were sky high, but that's all the time for millennials and Gen Z trying to buy a house now. So people are more distressed, but the question is there a disorder? Is everyone mentally ill now? Because if everyone suddenly started developing a kind of biological illness, that would be weird. And so it's understandable why maybe that's been questioned. But the answer is that there's nothing biological about it. People are more stressed, people are more depressed, anxious these days because of all this rising instability that we literally don't know if we're going to be able to buy food or heat our house. Now, one of the consequences of the way society's changed is we have depoliticized mental health. And there are loads of good books on this, but one of the best is perhaps this, Sedated by James Davies, How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis. So it used to be the case that if you couldn't afford to both eat and heat your house, you went to your trade union representative and you said, look, I've got no money, I can't even afford the essentials here, and the trade union would argue for better working conditions. But as neoliberalism spread across the world and we dismantled trade unions, we had to come up with a new way to explain people's suffering that wasn't, hang on, this isn't a living wage anymore. And mental health disorders filled that gap. Now, if you went in and you said, I can't afford to eat and heat my house anymore, and I'm feeling really stressed about that, doctors were saying, what? You're stressed, so you have an anxiety disorder. It puts the problem in you as the individual and not on the social factors that make you stressed. This was great for Big Pharma because they could then sell you a solution in terms of antidepressants rather than having to fix the structural issues in society. It's your fault that you're unhappy with your life. It's not that one guy has the same amount of wealth as the bottom of 50% of society put together. So, in summary, distress really is rising and all of the evidence supports that. So we are not overdiagnosing poor mental health. But it is misleading to call it a disorder because there's actually no disorder going on. What's happening is that people's nervous systems are responding accurately to the increased instability, to the fact that it is really hard to buy a house and provide basics like heating and fooding now. So if we want to tackle this, psychotherapy and SSRIs are only coping strategies. What we need is meaningful social change. There's some thoughts on why mental health is rising and why it is a result of inequality rather than as overdiagnosing mental health. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments.